So I'd like to start by welcoming everyone and acknowledging the traditional custodians, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders of the lands on which we all are present today. We are currently in Sydney at the Aurora Nation's lands, but we pay our respects to elders past, present and future from all the lands on which you are present today, and certainly very much welcome all of those Indigenous and Torres Strait Islanders that are here online with us today in our virtual webinar to introduce 3 of our exciting RD&E plan launches. RD&E plans, and this is our 3rd RD&E plan launch that we have held. So again, welcome. Great to see a great number of you online. Today we're actually going to be speaking about 3 of our emerging industries, our vanilla, date and finger lime industries. But before I get too far in, I just want to indicate that this is being recorded. So if you wish to remain anonymous, please do de-identify your name and do turn off your video, because we will be putting this up onto the website for all of those that have registered but may not be able to attend, and for others indeed to be able to see this. So I'm Olivia Reynolds. I'm the Senior Manager for our emerging industries within AgriFutures Australia. For those of you that might not be familiar with AgriFutures, we're a Commonwealth statutory authority, and we are one of 15 RDCs who invest in research, development and extension. So we are the only RDC that has the remit to invest in our emerging industries. So our industries that are animal and plant-based that do not attract a levy, or do not currently attract a levy, because one of our hopes for many of our industries is that they eventually do become levied. So our emerging industries investment aims to help these industries really grow and reach new markets in Australia and also indeed internationally. But I'll leave it there, because now I would like to introduce our facilitator for the day, who's going to take the reins on our 3rd RD&E plan launch, Al Fullerton, who you can all see online. So Al is an entrepreneur, a venture builder and a venture capital fund manager focused for the past decade around sustainability, renewable energy and agri-food tech based predominantly in Asia. Prior to this, Al spent nearly a decade in the financial markets, working with CBA, Macquarie Bank and Tradebook in Hong Kong before launching his first startup back in 2013. And since returning from Asia late in 2018, Al has run a private ag tech fund on behalf of a Melbourne asset manager that has invested in 4 Australian startups. And January of this year, formally launched Mandalay, an agri-food tech VC fund that applies his sleeves up capital strategy to investing. So thank you, Al. Wonderful to have you facilitating our 3rd RD&E plan launch, and Al has done our previous 2 as well. I'm now going to hand over. Al's going to start with a little bit of housekeeping before we launch into our exciting agenda for the day. Thanks, Al.
Thanks, Olivia. Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here. Thank you for that kind introduction. As Olivia said, this is number 3 in the series, and they keep on, seemingly get better and better, and the opportunities in emerging industries in Australia, I find this quite fascinating. So I'm really excited today with the launch of these 3. In terms of housekeeping, extremely streamlined. Stay on mute. If you have questions, and we really do open up the floor for questions, just type them into the message section of the of Teams, and we will go through and we will try and cherry pick some of those questions, or we'll try and answer as many of those as we can to the speakers. So you can post those at any stage that you would like. What else was there? I think that was, Olivia, there was something I feel like I'm forgetting, but
no, I think that's all good, Al.
That might have been it. Okay, great. Yeah, no, housekeeping is not my strongest suit. Anyway, look, lovely to be here. As I said, for me, being involved in the startup ecosystem for the past decade in, predominantly in Asia, the overlap between emerging industries and emerging companies are quite remarkable and very similar. Both of them are on a similar trajectory curve, that could have, capital constraints. They're trying to break into new markets. They're trying to disrupt, or they're trying to change mindsets. All those kind of the DNA that you find in a startup, you can find in emerging industries. And there's a host of opportunity here in Australia for us to support in multiple facets the emerging industries, which AgriFutures is doing an exceptional job, but also for us to actually provide regional development and growth on the back of this. And I think it's such an important, part in Australia is this sort of regional development and growth, using and utilising, different emerging industries, which are grown all around the world, but we have a climate suitable for them. And in this day and age, with a huge narrative around, climate change and what does that mean, looking at species that can grow in arid conditions, can grow in Australian conditions, that can actually be complementary to existing crops, and supply both domestic markets, but also we've got 2/3 of the world population just above us. And so we're in an incredible position to be not only supplying domestically, but also exporting. The agenda for today is to hear from the three speakers. They'll talk for about 5 minutes each, and then there'll be a Q&A session where we can actually deep dive a little bit deeper on there. We'll then be following up with Tom Chirnside. Tom runs Reavers Capital, and really asked Tom to come and talk here today, really around the capital access. Tom specialises in very small scale right to large scale, predominantly agricultural entities on the lending side, on the debt side, and it's to really understand what does that mean for emerging industries, smaller industries, as they grow. How can you work with people like Tom to further develop and grow your industry and or crop or farming enterprise? So looking forward to that. What I might do then, without further ado, is we might go in, and I think our first cab off the rank that we're going to look at today is going to be finger limes, I believe, and I think Beck's going to bring up that screen there, and we're going to really talk about finger limes, which is amazing. I didn't know very much about finger limes until I had a really good chat with Russ the other day. Really interesting opportunity here on unknown crop, not without some requirements in terms of the establishment of an industry body, etc. And Russ is going to get into the reads here, and then we'll have the opportunity to talk a little bit on this. So I'll pass it over to Russ now.
All right. Can you hear me all right?
We can, Russ, yes.
You can. All right, no worries. All right, well, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, elders past and present and future, right across Australia, particularly from the point of view of we're actually talking about native plants here that provide food and botanicals. So I'd also like to acknowledge the other members of the team, Maria Redmond, Tanya Forsyth, and Paul Trainer from BCA, who helped prepare this plan, and obviously all the growers and processors, value adders, chefs who added to this as we went through. So we'll start back. Yes. Look, just a quick overview. Australia has a unique range of just not only finger lime, but other citrus species. You can have a quick read of what's on the screen there, but Australia is the only place in the world where we actually have citrus that grow in the desert, citrus that grow in the rainforest, and citrus that are very unique in not only their makeup, but their flavours and everything like that. So over the last 20 years, commercial production of particularly native finger limes has been developing. Most of the growers have multi-species operations, but there are some larger growers that just grow the actual native finger limes. But they really are a unique citrus species, and from that point of view, provide great opportunities. Keep going back. So the process for going through this was basically, it was designed around structured interviews. We were going to have workshops. COVID interrupted the actual process that had been planned for it. So we had two surveys, one basically looking at the people who actually grow finger limes, and the other one, still very similar, but targeted at producers who were processors, valuators, and particularly chefs, because for Australian native food, chefs have been the driving force for the commercialisation of these species. So we approached about 90 individuals we had, or individuals and organisations. We had 32 who participated in the process. It basically ended up a one-on-one structured interview around the surveys. It was based on the SWOT process, and it really looked at what was happening currently domestically and internationally, looked at the supply chain, particularly compliance issues, and from that we had a vision, produced some objectives for the industry, and 5 RD&E themes that we look to develop the industry into the future. Next one, please, Beck. So the issues that were identified by the participants, they're still niche. It's a very underdeveloped industry component of citrus, the citrus industry, and native food production in Australia. There's a huge diversity of native finger limes. At the moment, like a lot of native plants and botanicals, the export market's larger than the local market. And there is a general community lack of understanding and knowledge of how you actually use this. There is ongoing challenges for pests and diseases, along with one of the biggest issues, which is growing competition from overseas. There's been a lot of finger lime development overseas. We have places like University of Florida starting to develop finger lime programs. And if anyone knows about the University of Florida and Michigan, how they develop the blueberry industry, they are very experienced in that. Yes, Beck. All right, so these are the objectives, and they're very similar for a lot of industries that the players in the industry gave us. They want to increase consumption, they want a premium price, they want an export plan that's recognised by Australian government departments, particularly the Department of Agriculture. They want to look at using the whole product, including skins. They want an education of consumers. They want best practice adoption that'll improve profitability. They want to look at biosecurity issues that are causing fruit losses. And more importantly, for a lot of particularly other plants too, they want to protect the Australian intellectual property around native finger limes. So they were the objectives they came up with. Okay, Beck. Out of those, we produced, in conjunction with the industry, these 5 themes. Now, like I said before, there are very, very many varieties of finger limes, and there has been a huge amount of work done on actually developing new varieties. We only have PBR on 1 finger lime, and there's about 5 registered with the cultivar registration, Australian Cultivar Registration Association. So there's a lot of confusion around varieties. So the next one was production. There's no real agronomy information out there from any of the. New South Wales has got a tiny little bit through the Department of Agriculture here, but there's no real agronomy information for new players and even players that are just starting off. Looking at how they can minimise waste, how high quality food can be actually produced, the path to market, new value-added products, and these are priorities for the industry. A huge area that all the industry was interested in was markets, and particularly access, right? So they're finding, not just in Australia, but overseas, there are some real access barriers to finger limes getting in there, mainly because they're not recognised in MyCore, in the database the Australian government has to develop export protocols, in and out of countries. The other theme that was there was capacity building, and this really recognises its strong industry and to bring this industry together. Look, the points really about the industry is, 1, there is no industry body apart from Australian Native Food and Botanicals, ANFAB, that represents this industry, and it has for quite a few years. Yeah, it's been one of the actual priority species for the Australian native food and botanical industry. The investment in this RD&E plan is going to, a lot of it has to come from industry itself, which is fair enough. But what they really want to sort of get together at the end is they want to make sure from these 5 themes, and I've just highlighted a couple of the actual actions that are actually have high priorities, is we need a review of the current varieties in Australia. We need variety names that are recognised. We need agronomic practices that are available right across the board. We need to look and do a review of the existing value chain and identify areas to improve production. And we need to develop market and export guidelines for export protocols with key markets. So overall, yep, that's it.
What we'll do, that's perfect. Thank you, mate. It's a great note to lead on. And I'm going to come back to a lot of those because we did touch on some really interesting aspects around Australian IP. How do we protect ourselves in these overseas markets where there are big opportunities? You know, it's a really interesting point that you raised here, and I just want to come back to that when we have a Q&A session. So Russ, thank you so much for running through that. That was fantastic. We'll just keep moving along to our next crop, which I think I've got the right order here. We're going into vanilla next. Am I right in that? Sorry, I'm reading off my smartphone. Fantastic. Vanilla, I think it is, it's an incredible crop. I had a good conversation with Mohammed about this. And there was some crazy statistic like 2 out of 3 people, Mohammed, I'm probably butchering this, but 2 out of 3 people globally have some alignment with vanilla or something like this. There are some incredible figures here. And I'm going to pass over to Mohammed to unpack the Australian vanilla opportunity. And then we will be able to come back and ask some questions after Mohammed's 5-minute overview. So, yeah, delighted to introduce Mohammed.
Okay, awesome. There we go. Hello, everyone. Hope the screen is visible in its right order. Thank you very much for introductions and AgriFutures for organizing this. I also acknowledge my presence on Rakia country here in the northern part of Australia. It is my pleasure to share this part of findings from vanilla industry. So, and good to see some of familiar faces in the participants. They were part of our study, and hopefully they will enjoy our presentation. Look, why vanilla? The straight answer is that vanilla stand alone, it provides highest returns per hectare when it is grown at a scale at a commercial level. And although these statistics, these figures, they come from United States, but that gives us an indication in the bigger context that all other crops, horticultural high value crops, as we say them. So, but vanilla standalone produces 5 times compared with the strawberries, which is the second highest returning crops. So that is why we think that there is opportunity in vanilla, and why particularly for Australia. So Australia is world's 6th largest vanilla producer or importer at the moment, sorry. So trade bill is steadily increasing with increased demand for natural vanilla in domestic market. And beside our domestic market, Australian grown vanilla has an international market for clean and green brand as well. So geographically, Northern Australia is naturally suited for vanilla production. And major issues of cyclone and pollination are being addressed by adapting production systems and diversifying cropping patterns. So why we have not tapped into that so far? That would be the next question in some of the minds. So because vanilla is produced from all different sources. On the screen, you can see that it is produced from petroleum, it is produced from rice bran, it is produced from tree lignin, clove, olive oil, and then corn sugar. and among others, of course, vanilla beans as well. So, I mean, there are different other sources of natural vanilla and synthetic vanilla. That's why this pure vanilla has remained a bit of neglected so far. But then now the good thing is that the demand for natural pure vanilla extract, FDA has defined, given a definition of natural extract, and the market, I mean, which are largely ice cream and other flavors. So they are now, to retain their customer base, they are entering into the demand for pure vanilla extract. That's why we see there is opportunity of growing pure natural extract of vanilla. But the challenges associated with producing natural vanilla are first of all is germ plasm. What we found in Australian vanilla industry, that some of the producers, they are producing two different varieties, for example, and in the marketplace they are selling one for the other. So that was probably the first concern from Northern Territory's perspective. In Northern Territory, when we decided to bring vanilla to our cropping systems 3 years ago, and we started consultations with the existing vanilla growers and producers, so we came to know that this is the situation, and we found that it is important that we have the nomenclature right to start with. And for that, we started discussions with the national and international collaborators, and we are in the process where we will send some DNA of our material for validation and verification from our collaborators that what exactly which variety what is. So having the right species, correct species is important. And then there can be sterile plants, even if we are successful in planting right species and accessions. Then poorly adapted cultivars, wild material, all of these are germ plasm associated problems. Then second set of problem is growing information. There is no standard agronomy or post-harvest protocols developed for vanilla. Then pollination, those who are associated with vanilla so far, that is very tricky, very challenging. Vanilla flowers open only for a few hours in the morning, and if we are not successful in pollinating them, we lost the opportunity. Then harvesting maturity is needs to be specific. If we lost the right level of maturity, it starts shattering, and again the opportunity investment is lost. And curing, there is a lot of risk associated in the curing process of rotting and loss of the crop. So they have not been standardized yet for our conditions. Then pests and diseases, we do not know that what of them are of economic importance and how we can manage them. Then market connections and opportunities. There are only a few, we can count them on fingers when we were doing this RD&E survey, so we met with some of them who have established and very well established linkages and connections in the national and international markets. So they have developed their independent supply chains. But for new entrants into this space, these market connections and opportunities, so they are not accessible at. So this is why, I mean, it is not something which people can jump into vanilla farming and then they can start making highest returns from their investments. So these are some of the challenges which were identified, and we developed this RD&E plan. So we were given the opportunity of having a feasibility study first, and then developing this RD&E plan. So we got the opportunity of going to vanilla industry stakeholders more than once. And after COVID, we were fortunate that we could visit them and have good detailed discussions with them. And after 2 times physical interactions, we did a third virtual interaction as well, and we passed through the RD&E priorities with them. So what we have found, it is more of whole of the supply chain needs some level of support. To start with, availability of preferred cloning material and maintaining an active vanilla breeding program to incorporate desired traits of pollination, disease resistance, and higher yield. So we came to know that one variety, one section performing better in America or Papua New Guinea or elsewhere or within Australia in northern far north Queensland, it is not guaranteed that they will perform equally good in Northern Territory as well. So this acclimatization of accessions, that and then identifying right genes and then playing with them over time, that is important. It needs to be an ongoing thing. Then crop production and protection protocols to support sustainable growth of the industry. So we identified that agronomy and insect pest management, they are concerns. Harvest maturity and post-harvest handling and processing protocols need to be established to support sustainable growth of the industry. And around all of these three areas, capacity building of the vanilla growers and processors for improving productivity and profitability through improved production, post-harvest and supply chain processes, product diversification and marketing. All of them, they need really support.
What we might do there, Mama, can we just, we'll end up on this slide. We're just gone a little bit over time, but we can come back and revisit this in the Q&A session.
Sure.
In terms of the next steps there. But thank you for running through that. We'll just move on. I think it's something really interesting to return because the economics of vanilla, as that chart showed, is incredibly attractive. My mind straight away thinks, could this be utilised in something like indoor farming, where you compare that to a strawberry and the yield and the value is so much higher? It's an interesting one to think of, and also obviously the Australian climate. The other thing too, that counter-cyclical nature. I think Mohammed said to me when we caught up that 99.9% of vanilla is produced in the Northern Hemisphere. So if you're producing it from a counter-cyclical, and down south, then there's an opportunity there potentially. But look, they're things that we will touch on a little bit more during the Q&A session. Now, moving on to the Australian date palm, I've got Peter, who I had the pleasure of talking to the other day. I haven't met his colleague yet, but I'm equally as excited to hear from him as well. But look, I'll pass over. This is another just fascinating opportunity here, and I really enjoyed my conversation with Peter the other day, understanding more about this species. Oh, hang on, 99.9% of dates are grown in the Northern Hemisphere. I was actually stealing Peter's line. So sorry, there we go. So I was actually, for clarification, 99.9% of dates are grown in the Northern Hemisphere, not vanilla. But I was just preempting the Australian date palm presentation here by launching in with that statistic. So, Peter, I'll pass over to you to discuss.
Thanks, Al. I hope everybody can hear me. I've got Stuart Putland here, and we're going to do a bit of a tag team. Stuart co-wrote the plan with myself and a few other contributors as well. So we'll just go straight into it. Why dates? Well, why dates indeed? But these are the main points, I guess. There are established markets for dates, both here in Australia and internationally. At the moment, the Australian market is grossly undersupplied with Australian dates. I get inquiries all the time wanting to buy dates, and I just haven't got the production to match the market. There is massive international markets for the fresh date product. It's counter-seasonal to the Northern Hemisphere, and there are strong markets in the Middle East, North Africa, and particularly the Muslim countries, Indonesia, I'm thinking about, and also other Southeast Asian countries as well. So there's massive markets, and as Al said, 99.9% of the dates produced and consumed in the Northern Hemisphere. So this counter-seasonal thing is a huge advantage for the Australian product. I think the other presenters touched on the underlying economics, and you can muck around with figures, but there's high gross returns per hectare of land. Potentially we're looking at least $145,000 per hectare, and importantly, the returns are high returns per megalitre of water used, around 10k per water used. But I grow sultanas and currants, and they're returning about 25k per hectare. So that's a bit of an indication of the difference between other horticultural products. Dates have got some advantages with climate change. They're a very tough plant. It takes a lot to kill a date palm. They can survive long periods with limited water supplies. And I live in an irrigation industry area, and we sometimes have the access to water is very limited, and especially during droughts. And this won't be a problem with dates because if you don't water them, you mightn't get a crop, but they won't die. They love hot climates. 45 degrees is just paradise for date palms. It's just in Mildura we have a lot of we have periods where we have extended heat waves, and other crops like grapes struggle during these periods, but dates love it, absolutely love it. Dates are also a health food with many uses. There's around 3,000 varieties of dates. They can be eaten as fresh, semi-dried or dried. Can be eaten as snack dates. I think a lot of people these days can access medules. They're sold in the supermarkets as snack dates, imported from America or Mexico. You can also eat them as confectionery. But a lady customer, she actually feeds these snack dates to kids instead of lollies. So there's great opportunities for dates, as consumption of dates. There's also a lot of processed products, including date sugar, date paste, and date shakes, milkshakes. So they're just some of the advantages of dates. I could go on about them, but I'm restricted on time. The current situation, we've got a very small industry, but it is growing. There are date plantations in all mainland states and the Northern Territory. And growers, importantly, growers are trialling a number of date varieties. As I said, there's 3,000 date varieties, and some of them may be more suitable to certain regions than others. And I might switch over to Stuart now, and he can look at that.
Okay, we'll quickly go through the plan. Look, we spent a fair bit of time working with the Australian Date Industry Association. We've talked to a whole range of growers. We've talked to retailers, wholesalers, researchers as well. And Mohammed's name actually came up. We looked at that. We talked to you, Mohammed, on the way through, I'm sure. Anyway, we've come up with a number of key objectives for the date industry, and a lot of this aligns with what we've seen in these other two industries. Improving on-farm productivity is the key. The ability to realise the industry's production per hectare is probably our key strategy.
Yeah, I'd just like to butt in there a bit. Our main problem is our yields per palm are well below what those being achieved internationally. I've just been to America, and they're getting around about 250 kilos of Bahi dates per palm, and I'm at the moment getting around about 10 kilos of dates per palm, and that's associated with the fruit set issue. And so that's our main priority, is to lift our production or yield per hectare or yield per palm and get improved production.
Yep, that is the key one. You can see the other strategies sitting there under farm productivity, and they all make sense as you have the ability to read them. So we'll switch over to the next slide. Building industry capability and capacity. Again, growing industry. This is a similar theme. The only differences we've got here is that we've got the ability to share local and international research, and the ability to plug in with Pete, having travelled to the States and a whole heap of other places are available. That can easily be done. Strategy 2, which I think is really, really important, the industry is keen to set up an R&D levy type of system. So there is a stream of funds coming in there, leadership capacity, and then obviously building that investment profile for dates is key to the industry as well. Finally, increasing the capacity to meet the quality specifications. We've got a really good market in Australia. A lot of it's been driven by overseas immigration, recent immigration patterns into Australia, but that's meant we've got a great domestic market. And it's about making sure that we keep that market at the right quality level and then look to develop these export markets.
Next one.
All right, and then the final, this is the final objective, isn't it? Yeah, ensure that the date industry is environmentally responsible. Look, responding to climate change challenges will be key for dates, but we think they're really well placed. Utilisation of water, I think, will be a key advantage for dates in terms of production per megalitre of water under irrigation situations.
They could also use water with high concentrations of salinity that would kill other horticultural crops such as vines. So there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, and it's wastewater is particularly the issue in here. And then finally, you know, the ability to working with net zero carbon emissions. These plants are around for many, many years, and their ability to accumulate and store carbon is quite significant. So that's something that is sitting there as a longer term priority.
That's a wonderful summary, and thank you for condensing it. I know that there was a huge amount more that could have been said and touched on there, and that carbon sequestration piece is something which is been flowing through a lot of these emerging industries as an additional revenue stream, but also contributing to target net zero and the whole decarbonisation movement. And in fact, I believe all three of the emerging industries that we're speaking about today have got such applications in decarb. For me, what's fascinating is a 25x opportunity in yield growth that has been achieved in the US in a market where they'll share similar costs of labour and a similar, where sometimes when you're comparing, emerging industries, you've got to compare it with a more developing country where labour costs are significantly less. So I think that upside is there in terms of it's kind of been shown and proven, and a 25x yield increase, which I know Tom Churnside would agree with me, but we're coming up shortly will be said that those are nice kind of figures. But look, we're now going to open up the floor to questions for our speakers today. And so some questions have been posted in the side there. Actually, quite a lot maybe. I don't know whether Olivia or Beck, you've been keeping up with those questions and any that you want to throw out there or where we got up to.
Absolutely. I can certainly start with those. Oh, wow, just a whole heap just rushed through there. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to come back to the top. Beck's very nicely marked it for us so we can see the
oh good, I was going back up
plans.
into previous ones. I was like looking at Tea and Sesame. I thought, hang on, I was pitching Daniel's on there, but
yeah. So Russ, the first one's for you around finger lime. Can you please elaborate on the uses for finger limes, including the flesh and skin?
Can you hear me all right now?
Yes,
we can.
Yep. Look, what's actually happening is that the skin has been examined for particularly oils, and a lot of citrus oil
Russ, you've somehow joined twice, and that's why we're getting that feedback. We've got two of you now.
Right. I'm just going to dismiss one.
Russ, what I suggest is actually you just shut down completely and then come back in as one. We'll go to another question while we wait for you to do that.
Thank you.
No worries. Okay. Okay, let's jump. I'm just looking if we've got any more finger lime questions. Oh, sorry. Keeps moving.
I think
if we've got any more
finger lime waste there was, I think,
Yeah.
oh, that was a reply in there. So I think quickly, if we come back to do you want to come back to the finger lines once Russ is back on, or is he back?
Yeah,
Russ is back on.
Let's go down to our date palms next. So a question we have here is, what are the important first steps that growers need to take if they wish to grow vanilla? So that's for you, Sahel.
Thank you very much for the question, Olivia. Australian dairy industries, first of all, they need to form an association. We found that there is no formal body where most of the growers can come together and ask for support. I mean, we as the agencies, we are willing to support, but we cannot work with individual growers. So they need to form some kind of organization. And after that, from research perspective, first of all, I mean, whatever they're growing, we need to make use of that. So the post-harvest handling and processing protocols development will help most of them. Second is the production of true to type material, and tissue culture can help with that. And then agronomy of whatever they will grow, it's proper agronomy. I think that can be good starting point. And then as we move on, we have the RD&E plan to disclose our way forward going with the industry.
Terrific. Thanks, Sahel. The next question we've got is from Maria, and it's for vanilla. So we have the Australian demand mentioned on the vanilla presentation. Was it synthetic vanilla or natural? I think I know the answer, but I'll let.
Yeah, I can say for others' interest, if who have not read. So it is natural vanilla, and mainly we import beans, cured beans from the markets who produce more of them, and then our people import and then extract vanillin from that.
Terrific.
I might jump in with a quick question there too, just on vanilla, which I think is I mean, it's a statement/question, but interesting one with vanilla. Short time frame to harvest, so 9 months till first harvest. Evergreen crop. We spoke about incremental development versus transformational development. Can you run through that for everyone, just to explain that? Because I thought that was a really interesting approach from an emerging industry standpoint, agnostically. So that's incremental development versus transformational development.
Yeah, so that aligns actually with the next question. Don't ask it again. Veronica has asked what is the industry view of the future protected cropping for vanilla. So that aligns with that. Look, we came across in our discussions with the industry, there are two clear groups. One of the groups is kind of smaller scale vanilla growers who want to come together and they need some support in dealing with access to planting material and then agronomy, post-harvest, market access, all of that. But their pace of movement will be natural and possibly slow. So they don't have high targets in their mind, which they want to achieve over a couple of years. But in the meantime, we came across a group of investors or kind of associates with the vanilla industry. So they have transformative plans. They want to bring material, non-germplasm from whether it is imported from US or established industry, and then in tissue culture, it is multiplied and millions of plants are produced, and then in the protected cropping like a factory. So these plants are, vines are raised and the beans are harvested at uniform level of maturity, and then they are processed, cured, extracted, all done in the domestic market and export market. So this is what we look at the transformational industry perspective. So there are two of them, and we are available to support any and all of them. But yes, incremental with the current existing small scale farmers, and transformational with a set of investors coming to the production and post-harvest handling marketing side of things. Thanks.
Terrific.
Fantastic.
Thank you. And I'll just, Al, I'll just jump back to that finger lime waste question, because I think there was a broader question that was probably targeted at me around investment opportunities. So I'll point you to our emerging industry webpage, which outlines our investment plan going forward. But stay tuned. We're in the first year of a new strategic plan for AgriFuture. So in the first year of a 5-year plan, this is very much our planning phase where we're doing a lot of that foundational type procurements to really establish our pathway going forward. But stay tuned, because it's going to be a lot clearer for our new and emerging industries going forward around what the opportunities for investment are and where each industry might slot into those opportunities. So we've got something much bigger planned. That's all I'll say at this moment. It's very exciting, I think, for our industries, but as you know, many of our stakeholders well recognise, we're here to support your growth and development. So we want to streamline that going forward and be really targeted and strategic about our approach. But for now, I will point you to our emerging industries webpage and our investment plan, because that should outline that for you. Okay. Do we have Russ back on now? Yes, we do. Russ, did you want to finish finish what you started?
I don't actually know what I started there. Look,
you had a question.
Yeah, no, I met with the two joins and stuff like that. Look, at the moment, the waste stream is based around the actual pith and skin. And there's been some pretty exciting research started around the oils within that citrus skin. And they're very different to a lot of the other citrus, because there is citrus oil produced around the world mainly from the skin. So that's the area where they're concentrating to start, because it is the normal waste. Usually the citrus is like a citrus caviar, the beads of citrus, the actual lime beads are squeezed out and you're left with the skin, which is a large amount of waste. So particularly Southern Cross Uni is doing some work on distilling the oils, both cold pressing and steam distilling, and getting some exciting results about what it could be used for into the future.
Terrific. Thanks, Russ. There's another question here around from Harjeet around whether fruit fly is still the biggest barrier to exporting fresh finger lime.
Look, it is at the moment. For specific countries, it's a real problem, and within Australia, it's a specific problem for moving fruit around us, like it is for a lot of fruits in Australia that are affected by fruit fly. We had one project actually carried out with the Department of Agriculture, which came up with very mixed results, right down to no fruit fly activity in the field at all, but in a laboratory situation, they had one sting, and that basically triggered exclusion from a lot of our particularly export countries. So there is still that possibility, but as I mentioned before, one of the ways that we can actually deal with this is to get finger lime in the MyCord database, so that the Australian government can negotiate export opportunities overseas, protocols that can be used like they are used between the states and Australia to actually get them there.
Terrific. Thank you, Russ. So we'll move down. Sahil, we've got another question for you here around, sorry, I'm just trying to see who, how will the date industry accommodate for the need for hand pollination? A question from Liz.
That's me, is it?
With Peter and
Oh,
Stu.
sorry, dates. I do apologise.
Well, there's no getting away from it. Dates are a labour-intensive industry. You know, you've got to hand pollinate, you've got to dethorn, you've got to pick them, and you've got to prune them by hand. So it's no getting away from it. They are a labour-intensive industry. However, in America, for some varieties anyway, they've got pollinators. They can do it by machine, and it's just like a big blower, and they stand back about 6 foot from the tree, the palm, and just let the pollen blow the pollen into the flowers. So it can be done with certain varieties, but other varieties you're going to need to hand pollinate them. So I mean, that's the situation.
I guess the other point is that those numbers that Peter showed up in terms of the gross margins for the date industry, they already include that.
Okay, great. And just building on that, someone else has asked, Kristen, what wind speeds and chill factor can date palms withstand? So I guess we're trying to understand what are their, southernmost limits.
Well, I wouldn't be growing them in Tassie. They're a desert-loving plant, basically. They love sandy soil. They love water. But they have, Australia's got similar climate to where they're grown in America, certainly in the Middle East. We could do with a bit more heat, but when they get tall, I guess there is a bit of a issue with wind. If you get a gale, they might blow over, I guess. But they certainly can stand a fair bit of wind. They've got a massive root system, especially in sandy soils. They've got a huge root system. 9 metres away, you'll get their roots from the palm. So I guess my main problem is heat with date palms. If we get enough heat units, that's the issue there.
Understood. Thank you very much,
I've got
Peter.
one quick. I might just add one quick question in there, or just to talk a little bit on there on the exporting opportunity for dates. Is the use in Islamic countries as part of the religious, festivals and the consumption. Could we just mute our phone? Sorry. So like big demand from Middle East and Southeast Asia. Peter and Sion are right in that. The large Islamic countries and the use of dates. So us in terms of geographically being positioned close to countries like Indonesia with huge Muslim populations, there's actually quite an opportune export market there, where my understanding is demand is very much outstripping supply in the Southern Hemisphere for fresh dates.
Dates and they're very much part of the Islamic culture. It's tradition to break the fast of Ramadan with a date. So it's just been part of their culture for hundreds of years, well, thousands of years really. And certainly on our doorstep, we've got Indonesia, the country with the largest Muslim population. So we see great opportunities to export dates there, but also in the Middle East as well. I mean, we're not talking about, the general population, I guess. We're talking about the very affluent middle class, and they will pay large sums of money for, fresh dates. We're talking about these, the Kalal dates. They're hard, crunchy and fresh. So not so much with the semi-dried stuff because you can store that anyway. But certainly the Kalal dates, there's just a massive market, and I'll get a lot of visitors call in from Southeast Asia, from Malaysia and Indonesia to buy property, and they just love these yellow dates. And it's just the export market's very, very exciting. But we've got to raise our production before we can even think about the export market.
And I think that's a really important point for people talking about date production in Australia. Traditionally in Australia, for people who haven't looked at this industry, dates are those horrible, very dry things you get in a supermarket, in a box or that sort of thing. This industry is so far away from that, it is not funny. And I think for expressing that within Australia in terms of investment, it's a really important point to note. It's a different industry than what people may just expect.
I think that also flows on, Stuart, with the fact that like all three emerging industries that we're talking about today require education of the consumer to actually understand what they're buying isn't what's being sold, or what a finger lime is and how do you utilize it, or vanilla versus synthetic vanilla. So there is that market education for the consumers to understand. Just because this is what you have been consuming doesn't mean this is what it's the real deal, etc. And I think that's also flown through, and that's part of the ability to break into these markets is around, your branding and around building up that, education and insight piece as well. So that's really, really interesting. Olivia, do you want to do one or two more questions, and then we'll sort of pivot over at 2 o'clock in a couple of minutes, and bring in Tom to have a bit of a conversation on I mean, as we're talking economics, to kind of start unpacking a few of those things there.
Absolutely. Sorry, I was talking to myself, Al.
That's all right.
We've got a question here from Paul Guthia for vanilla. So he talks around, I understand the dollar figure for vanilla versus other crops, but are we concerned around the development of a major industry that if we develop a major industry, the price would fall? And do we have any sense or commentary around that? Sahil.
Yes, sure. No, I was just looking at our research, which was conducted again in United States, and consumers were offered the preference, that what is their preference out of the natural, synthetic, mixed. I mean, 5 different options were offered to them, and majority of them, 48% of them, they were after natural vanilla. So that reflects that demand is there of the natural vanilla. But and then, I mean, some of the major chains like Walls, they have declared that all of their vanilla flavor will be coming from natural source and pure natural sources going forward. So if this kind of pull continues to remain from our consumers, as Anne also said, and they are getting more education, they are getting more informed, and then the companies like Walls, they continue to use this natural pure vanilla. So we can see that for the foreseeable future, the demand will continue to rise, and there will be a natural decline in price, but that will not be an abrupt and at a level that industry can collapse. Industry has huge potential.
Terrific. I might just answer one question here, Al, which again I think is probably more for AgriFutures. So Adam Briggs has put forward, in the absence of a dedicated levy system, how will progress against these plans be measured at the conclusion of their 5-year duration? Have performance measures been established? So for all of these RD&E plans, it really is up to industry to drive them. And you would have heard a number of our speakers today have referenced the importance of a industry body of some type. We actually have Daniel Weinstock online, who is probably an exemplar industry that has shown how an industry from the sesame industry, who has shown how if you grab the reins of this plan and form an industry body, and they started with an informal body and then they moved through, they've just recently formalised and shown that really strong engagement, activity and growth, that AgriFutures in discussion have now actually funded them over a 5-year with a $2 million investment to actually accelerate that industry. So it's really about that strong stakeholder engagement, that drive. And when we see that in AgriFutures, and not just us as a funding body, other people see that drive and commitment, I'd like to say that that's where investment starts to follow. So I would really encourage you to, and I'm sure Daniel, because he's always willing to have a chat, reach out, because he can certainly tell you about his journey and how industry can seek growth, because that is, a really great example of a recent industry that is accelerating. So measuring performance, we've got a lot of things in place, Adam. So we've got a lot of activities, as I indicated, monitoring and evaluation, and so forth. Stay tuned. Like I said, we're in the first year. In probably 6 to 12 months, you'll start to see some really strong cemented ideas around how we're actually going to take our industries and guide them through this process. So yeah, stay tuned on that one. I'll leave it there, Al.
No, that's great. No, look, you couldn't be left on a better spot to talk about growth than for us to pivot over. And look, I'm delighted to introduce Tom Chirnside, who a partner in Rebus Capital, one of the co-founders, who's an independent capital advisory firm. For me, I'm in the equity side. Debt and access to capital is an absolutely crucial part of the growth profile of an industry and or company. When I need advice on the debt side for our portfolio companies, Tom is who I speak to about it. The reason I wanted Tom to come in today, now look, obviously, you know, we kind of, everyone's sort of aware of the current economic conditions globally, a rising interest rate environment. There's all this sort of that narrative around it. It's not so much to talk about this, it is to talk about more around, you know, the evolution of a company to get funding, to have access to capital, working capital, to build it. How do you develop and grow? What do you need? And also domestically, where do you access this capital? Now, you might not be ready for it now if it's a super, you know, emerging product, but how do you get to there? And the other part that Tom and I, we're going to have a bit more of a fireside kind of conversation for 15 minutes or so, but it's just going to be around, you know, the investment that Tom sees. Now, Tom works, as I said before, with, you know, with small farming operations, right, to some of the big ones. You know, he's hugely enthusiastic and a huge supporter of the Australian agricultural industry as a whole. And so, you know, he kind of has the credentials and the know-how, but really can talk the language of us all. So what I might do, Tom, I might just ask you to introduce yourself, mate, and Rebus Capital, and then
Sure.
we'll go from there.
Thank you. Thanks, Al, and thanks everyone online for taking the opportunity to listen to what we've got to talk about today. Yeah, as Al was mentioning, look, we're an independent capital advisory and funding placement company. What our aim is to obviously bring a lot more choice and flexibility to the Australian market. You know, we've seen the maturing of this market quite consistently over the last 5 years, which we'll go into a bit more detail. You know, the basis behind Rebus was the fact that we wanted to support emerging industries where possible. We knew that accessing capital was always a challenge based on my sort of 18 years in the market, and I always felt that, you know, at that startup or even emerging industries was always a challenge for the clients that we wanted to support the most, because they were looking to innovate. They had some amazing ideas, like, you know, Peter was talking about dates out of Mildura. I know that area really well, and it was really interesting to hear that conversation take place. So, you know, we get the clients where they're at that evolution peak, where they probably need the most amount of support, where they find that potentially the traditional funding market can be a little bit, I suppose, opaque and doesn't create the atmosphere they need to help them to that next level. So, you know, our core focus is about trying to understand a client's operations, you know, what they're looking from a market proposition, opportunities, you know, the hurdles we might be facing in regards to those different markets. We've created a platform where we've got approximately about 45 different funding partnerships for a variety of different organisations from both domestically and overseas. They range between sort of the banks, the traditional banks and non-banks, where they will fill a void where others, you know, find it maybe too risk averse. But look, we're very tenacious about what we've done. I've spent sort of probably the last 20 years in this market, being across multiple industries, which we'll talk about, and set a wide range of evolving and emerging industries, which have created, you know, some innovative technologies. They've created some amazing outcomes for the industry, and some of them are actually, 3 of them are on the AFR today. So it was quite interesting to see some of our baby companies that have emerged and been bought out in the poultry industry to aquaculture. You know, they all started at a very, very small nucleus, and where they are today is fantastic. But they didn't get there through, you know, just being able to have a big bank supporting them, and it was easy. It was hard, and so we tried to help that hard be a bit easier by providing, you know, the support we did. So, but again, today, guys, look, please, you know, treat this conversation as general advice. You know, I'm not here to tell you what to do, and I'm sure you've all got your own sources of funding and, you know, advice, but we're just here to probably help complement what's happening today. So I thought as well, Al, it'd be relevant just to give you a bit of an idea about who we are. You know, Rebus Capital started just over 3 years ago, or just under 3 years ago. I still remember the night that I walked into to Sophie, my wife, and said that Rebus Capital has finally been born. We've decided that we have to go ahead with it. It was the fear in her eyes was quite obvious, but look, after 18 years of being in this market, I knew it was the right thing to do. We wanted to support small industry. We wanted to be something different. We wanted to be able to be edgy and be able to listen and hopefully create some opportunity for clients where there was a gap. So Rebus Capital was born. You know, I spent you know, sort of 18 years in the pre and post farm gate market. Again, we've seen, you know, a lot of the industry grow around that. I had a very big passion because of our families. Historically, all came from farming backgrounds. I always feel very comfortable sitting out in the paddock versus sitting in an office. And, you know, that's where this sort of passion for ag has sort of evolved. But it's been an amazing journey. You know, we've gone across viticulture industries to milk processing, horticulture, aquaculture down in Tassie, automation of the sort of abattoir space and modernising mushroom companies. Really quite interesting, very diverse, but they all sort of have a similar need in the fact that they do have this requirement for access to capital to be able to grow, to be able to support, the evolution of these emerging industries. And it's been, a fantastic opportunity to be a part of that. I've got a passion for this automation in ag. We've seen some emerging companies come out of this, and it's been especially satisfying to see some of them commercialise themselves. So, that's something that I'm quite passionate about and will continue to be involved in. So, as Al mentioned earlier, I live in Geelong, about an hour out of Melbourne. We've got my wife, Sophie, works in disability services, and Albie and Eloise at the local primary school here. So, thank you for taking the time to have a chat with myself and Al today. I think, as Al was just mentioning before, I think where we currently stand and picking up a copy of the AFR today, I think it's important to probably just give you guys a bit of a snapshot about how we do go to market, how we fund, and then just a little bit about what we're seeing from the industry. And then Al and I can go into a bit of Q&A on the fireside chat. So, as I said, I think we have deliberately positioned ourselves to have a wide range of different funding partnerships, because all of our clients have differing needs, be them at the emerging space or be SME going into mid-market. But we cannot afford to have a very, finite group of clients that we can fund with, because our market is diverse and our clients need that access to capital, which is, can take on, be it what Peter's doing in Mildura with the dates and how they help bring productivity to market. So we have, as I said, a range of different banks, overseas debt funds, private credits and venture debt capital institutions. But what I have seen certainly over the last 15 years is quite a maturing of our capital markets here in Australia. We historically are very much, I think, as people would realise, a bit of a 4-pillar policy sort of approach as to how we would fund our growth. But as we know, the world's getting smaller and Australia is getting, more, getting a lot more access to the global market, especially into Asia. So we're seeing a lot more of that funding come into Australia, which is fantastic, which is driving great opportunities for these emerging markets and companies being able to access different forms of capital. So, we are, in the way that we fund, all about how do we build long-term relationships and give growth to these emerging sectors for clients. We want, and I think we do a pretty good job of this, of being a bit of an extension to our clients' existing staff. We want to be there as a partnership with them, and I think clients get a strong sense of that with us. We don't work 9 to 5. We do stuff on weekends. We take calls all over the time because, that's how our clients think. And sometimes they'll have a thought about at 9 o'clock at night, and we're okay to obviously have those conversations because that's what we want to be as an extension to their team. So, we are about grassroots, about filling the gap between the traditional domestic banks that have moved, maybe without not being too unfair, to probably more of a product-orientated set, which can be quite restrictive at sometimes to our clients that are in that sort of growth phase and emerging into into new technology or into a new market, like. I keep saying to you, Pete, about dates. So, look, that's a little bit about, how we fund. I think, as Al raised, picking up the fin review this morning, guys, and just doing a bit of general consensus about what's happening. We know that we're in some extraordinary circumstances in regards to where we've been the last, say, 10 years. We've got some inflationary pressures. We've got rising interest rates. And some major supply chain constraints that potentially might happen from, the unions and what might take place there, which is putting some pressure on the, on the SME market and emerging market. However, it is very clear to us there's a clear resilience in our sort of in the SME and emerging space. We know that they are good at seeking independent advice. We know that there will be challenges, but we've, in regards to the, being more productive, more innovative, and more sustainable. But the capital structures are out there, and we're really trying to help work with our clients to support that industry through these, I won't say challenging times, but, fluctuating times that we're seeing. So we know that next year is going to, please.
I'm going to jump in with this fireside, mate, because what I want to do is you've just raised all these points that I keep on wanting to unpack. So it's me being impatient. Sure. But,
please.
what we've got here, because Olivia's point before, agri-futures play in supporting, not just financially, but also obviously in terms of other forms of support to develop these industries. There's what I do, which is in the equity space, and then there's obviously the debt markets, the capital access to, and there are these sort of, and there can be combinations of all three, is how things can look, and we see this a lot in the agricultural industry. So the emerging industry profile, what we're looking at here, I guess the forms of capital. What does that mean? What are forms of capital? How do you unlock it? What does that actually mean in terms of the different types that are there, and how does one go around unlocking those different types of capital?
Yeah, I suppose, thanks, Al. The point to that would be that I suppose traditionally there is we in Australia has played a sort of a bit more of an asset-backed sort of approach in regards to how we can fund the support of the industry. So, generally a banking terminology would be about an LVR approach and would take a collateral-based sort of a position across the entire company. What we have been aggressively focusing on with our clients is an ability to raise and get better leverage out of their balance sheet that they may have, or the emerging balance sheet. So we would use different classes of assets to help them to get to that next stage. It might be core debt, it might be working capital, it might be some capex for their, a lot of automation that we've gone through in the food industry. It might be standalone, so you might use that as just as a recourse back to a piece of infrastructure. Instead of just playing it as a collateral-based or a total pot solution. So what we've been working quite aggressively within the industry is how do we carve up, in essence, different forms of that balance sheet to get the best leverage possible for a client, because we're seeing that has been generally undervalued. A lot of assets in the market have been undervalued and not leveraged appropriately, which then creates a challenge where a client generally, if it's private, has two forms of funding, debt and equity, that they have to basically potentially reduce their exposure, of their own equity position and take on an external party, which sometimes they might not want to do. So historically, we've seen a lot of clients that they've raised equity for maybe automation or an efficiency outcome in their company. So they've had to invest, through equity to do that, whereas there is alternatives out there that are very open to looking at how do you get that and a debt profile versus getting it on an equity base. So, I suppose to your point, ours is about how do we extend your debt in a positive way against the balance sheet assets you have, versus using it as just a general traditional 4-pillar model would be as an asset-backed lend versus an individual sort of class of assets.
And when you're saying 4-pillar, you mean CBA, NAB, Westpac,
4-pillar,
so that's been traditionally, the four kind of majors and that. So what is non-bank lending? What's that? What does that mean? I guess in terms of because I guess for and I've had these conversations with portfolio clients and others. Kind of equity, debt. Kind of borrow from CBA. There's obviously a low level of perceived risk with borrowing from that. If I'm going to be borrowing from somebody who's a non-bank lender, does that risk profile change? What's that kind of mean? I guess as an access to capital.
Yeah, sure. I think, look, it's interesting that point, Al, as I was raising, Australia is maturing and the access to capital from overseas and from, we call it private funds, is certainly accelerated quite aggressively in the last sort of 5 years. So a stat would be that the fact that the US, about 80% of all the funding is completed via the private credit market, whereas in Australia it's about 20%, and that's growing in a positive way. So when we talk about, and if guys looked at my LinkedIn profile, you'll see some commentary towards, the Scottish Pacifics of the world as an example only. They're a private credit fund. They raise money through the wholesale market, so they will use the funds available through a NAB or someone else to be able to provide a warehouse facility. They would then re-leverage that back out to the market, and that would be, call it a private credit market. Today, they've probably got close to $1 billion of assets under management in regards to what they've done for the market. So they are filling that void in regards to the domestics. Yes, I suppose the point to this would be they're willing to leverage more, they're willing to risk more, they're a bit more flexible, because naturally a proposition has to be a bit more, I won't say edgy, but it has to fill that gap and be able to provide, a better leverage or a better access to both primary and tertiary assets. We've done a lot of food processing, a lot of post-farm gate conversations into that space where they've taken more risk against tertiary assets, but they've understood the cash flows really critically. So they are willing to take more risk. They are probably a little bit simpler to deal with. I'm not saying anything about the four-pillar conversation at all, but they are giving that a new form of capital. It's at the cost of capital is there or thereabouts, but what they are doing is providing a bit more independent funding and not having to take the total balance sheet as collateral security to be able to give that client some leverage to keep growing.
Mate, amazing. I'm going to ask a couple more questions and open up to the floor with a view that we'll try and do 10 minutes of kind of Q&A. And obviously Tom's details will be available. But look, for me, I guess, look, the debt serviceability is one aspect of it. A lot of the narrative that I've found in these 3 seminars that I've now been involved with has been the requirement of automation in Australia for emerging industries. Some of the reasons will be because you're competing with countries that are utilising a more inexpensive labour force.
Sure.
Some may be growing in more hostile conditions where harvesting can be more challenging. There are a host of reasons. So that automation piece in agriculture from my end, from the funds management end, we're really interested in it from a streamlining and obviously economies of scale. From your end, what are your views on that automation area? I know that you've already had some really interesting clients involved in that space that you've been working out facilities for them to fund that automation. What's it look like? Just a quick kind of recap on that.
Maybe what I could do, Al, is give an example of maybe without names, a client that we've done some work with, and I think that probably might give some people a bit of a live scenario. So I think innovation with automation is critical. I think the cost of labour in Australia is probably disproportionate to overseas, so you need to be able to compete. And so, automation is going to be a critical point of that. I think Landcare showed that last week with Flavour Right. You would have seen in the ABC, and also with avocado automation. Without that, they just simply couldn't get yield and couldn't get productivity going to the state that they did to be able to service the domestic market here. So an example on that, on the automation, we had, and I'll give you an idea, we had a client that's in horticulture. They're the largest producer of salad leaf in Australia. The need for them was to access capital to keep driving efficiencies across this food grade automation they were going through. They went to their standard bank. Bank said no without, going through the why. So they needed to understand a bit clearer about the debt service capacity and leverage. So we took about 3 or 4 weeks, guys, and this is where we do try to differ to understand what's going on, understand the cash flows of that business and what this automation project was going to do. And with that, we were able to work through quite clinically just the significant investment. This was, the investment in the capital, what it was going to do to this client. In the long and the short of this, the outcome with the client was that we put in about $4.8 million of debt that was required to take on this automation project. Instantly, over the following week, it reduced their labour cost by about 28%, and their input costs with water and electricity reduced by about 35%. So it seems not that specific, but when you've got both Victoria and Queensland operations, it was quite significant for them. From the back of that, what happened is that they were able to award a national contract with a retailer by increasing their turnover because their throughput increased. So electricity, so input costs down, labour down, and they were able to put into their turnover. They were able to get more throughput, which was to be able to distribute greater to their retailers. So from a sustainability perspective, they also have done some projects with us, which have been amazing. So I think it's not about finding a deal. And I think it's about us building sustainable relationships where we can really use that trust and collaboration. And we did that enough with this client that we speak every weekend. We know more about their families than about our families. And we are able to solve an issue by just getting to understand what the problem was, where we might be able to assist, and doing the right credit profiling in regards to their debt service capacity, what this project was going to do, that it made it, it went through a private funder, and it was done quite easily, but on the basis that we put a lot of time in at the start to be able to demonstrate that we knew enough about what was happening that created a significant result for the client.
Fantastic. And I think that's a really good place to probably kind of ended there in terms of running through the opportunities. There's Olivia and I are always talking about how do these emerging industries attract investment, attract funding, attract partners, and it's so important to think of the different options that are there for you. As it grows, if you're co-cropping, intercropping with your existing infrastructure, or crop, the ability for you to be looking at mechanisms. And what I find really interesting about what Tom does, and why I always value his counsel, is because it's kind of looking at things and breaking it up into the components and working out how you can find a solution. It's not a blanket, okay, well, here's a loan, off you go. It's have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And I think that's where being smart and savvy as a emerging industry leader, as an emerging industry grower or farmer, as a startup founder, it's about savvy. It's about actually utilizing things and making, decisions that, intelligent, educated decisions. And look, 2023 is going to be an interesting year. I don't think we need to go into our own, thoughts. Look, there's going to be some volatility. I would say, however, that the market, bear markets are the breeding ground of innovation. They always have been. It's an exciting time because that's where people need to streamline things, and that's where innovation plays a crucial role. Some of the world's best, or the most successful tech companies globally have been founded in bear markets or in recessions. I would also say that the whole climatic narrative is only going to continue to gather momentum. The narrative out of COP27 has been around whatever happens globally with these macro conditions, countries and companies need to continue to focus on their targets for 2030 and their decarb solutions. A lot of what we've spoken about today in emerging industries has got a carbon or decarb or a carbon sequestration component to it. And that's something which is another string to the bow of these emerging industries. And that could be either with an additional revenue stream or it could be in terms of promoting that industry further because of its environmental credentials. So I think they're really interesting. What I'll do is, we've got a few minutes left. Just if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask Tom, as I said, his details will be available for people who obviously were looking to more formally have a discussion around your farming enterprise and or industry. But if there anyone has a question they'd like to throw out there, please feel free to.
Al, there is a question in there from Cinti, and she's really reaching out to those that are online, keen to hear about participants' experience or models of the costs, including non-financial, of getting capital investment and or agri-future support. She's a little bit wary.
Oh, there we go. Wariness of interference and loss of intellectual property has been made hesitant to apply for the grant funding, but also funding.
I suppose, I've been approached by a partner, and I just was as a new business, sort of, hesitant, and just decided to go on my own for now and self-fund. But I guess, support around that would be really great, even if it's not answered here. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I can do the equity piece, and Tom can do the debt piece. So there we go. The interesting, I suppose, quickly on the equity side is, looking for a strategic partner to invest equity investment, as in they would put capital into your business in for an equity stake in your company. In an early stage company where you're too early to potentially receive other capital, injections such as debt, it's commonplace to raise capital via that equity side. What I would say is that it's a long marriage, so make the right decision, because once they're in there, it's very hard to unwind that position. And also someone who shares the same goals and aspirations, the same work ethos, but also somebody who you have a good bond with, someone who you can bounce ideas from, and you have a really nice, pleasant relationship for. And most importantly, on day one, it has to start off well. If it's something where you're negotiating over percentage points or this, that, and the other, it's not you want it to start with everyone feeling really happy and enthused, and knowing someone is really good, or having that kind of background in there to bring someone in. The normal process in Australia, I've found, is it's sort of family and friend investors, government grant. Then you kind of get into a bit later stage, you start looking into venture capital and that sort of private investment. It is a more challenging landscape in Australia because historically we haven't been a venture capital nation. We've more been kind of invested in property and as well as sort of debt. So it's evolving, but at a slower pace. In terms of your loss of intellectual property on the equity side, an equity investor would just be a shareholder in a company. So if you own 80%, they own 20%. It's just an even split. The company itself owns the IP. In terms of grants, normally if you developed intellectual property after the grant, or the grant comes in and the further IP is developed, then that IP, because it's been funded by that government grant or that grant, then there is sometimes transparency or ownership things you have to look at there. In terms of if you've created IP and then get a government grant, your IP that you own, generally speaking, is your IP. That's not something that they can claw back or take or anything like that. So the finer detail will be in there. So don't feel like having these discussions will mean you're giving up your IP. There, a non-disclosure agreement can be signed, and the terms of the deal will articulate what that looks like. And you can then obviously say yes or no if you're worried about the loss of IP. It'll be stipulated in the terms there. So that's equity. Tom, I'll quickly pass over to, well, what level do you need to get to? Probably, Tom, is a really good question to start having discussions with someone like yourself around access to capital.
Yeah, I think, Al, in regards to, I would say we don't take a view that you must be, we're only going to do deals over a certain quantum. I think that's what's actually restricted Australia. So we don't, we take anything in regards to a conversation. If it's a growing market, it's anything sort of around a sort of 100,000 plus if there's a growing need for what's happening. So, yeah, that's where we'd start. And again, the first thing is to understand what the objective is and where the opportunity and challenge is maybe for the business, and sort of understand it first and then work forward from there, especially around where that source of capital can come from and is it solving the need of the client at that time. So,
and I think ultimately on the debt side too, it's serviceability, isn't it? I mean, can you service that debt?
Yeah.
And equity, you can actually be making no money. You could be, that's a part where, and obviously there's a risk reward profile. So in equity, you don't have to be servicing anything. It's a straight up transaction more often than not.
Yeah, and we're seeing, to that point, we're seeing a bit more emerging where there is those that are willing, if there is, forecasts and cash flows that show growth and potential that's not there, but they can dictate what it might happen over the next 12 to 18 months. Then there's a willingness to take, commercial risk on that based on the what sits behind the cash flow forecast.
Then that's fantastic. That's something that's obviously for emerging industries and companies. It's really worth having these conversations because you don't know what you don't know, and just because you think you fit into a certain category doesn't mean that you do. Cynthia, that's a great question. It's a really good question. It's one that it can be a bit of a black hole, but a lot of the protectionisms around now, around that founder, and there's a lot of clarity that you can get from discussions, and you'll never execute anything in terms of there'll be a term sheet, there'll be a shareholder agreement, there'll be a subscription agreement on the equity piece. So you're not going to suddenly find yourself losing IP without having you gone through it all and often get legal advice. But anyway, look, we are at our 2:30 conclusion. It's been a really interesting conversation. There's never enough time. I just want to thank all the guest speakers for their time and their energy and their efforts. And I really think these three emerging industries have got real potential to them. Economically, they look really interesting. The market opportunities are really interesting. And so, really ones to be on the radar there. I'd like to thank Tom for imparting his wisdom. And I guess the outtake for me is that explore options. Don't feel like you're ever kind of stuck there. There are tools and mechanisms at place to help accelerate businesses and grow. That's what it's there for. And the Australian marketplace is continuing to kind of expand and grow in the agricultural space, which is really exciting. And of course, thank you to AgriFutures, who are playing a crucial role in the development of this all. So I'll pass over to Olivia to round out the conversation.
Wonderful. Thanks, Al. And look, thanks very much for facilitating today. You've done, as always, a terrific job of guiding the conversation. I'd really love to extend also our thanks to all of our industry plan speakers today. Really great presentations. Great to hear about the industries. And a very special thank you also to Tom for coming in and speaking to us about debt finance. I think that was a really insightful fireside discussion, Al, that you led. So thank you for that. For those speakers today, if you're happy to share your contact details, please place them in the chat so that others can reach out. I think there's some interesting conversations, or indeed if you would like to reach out to others. Unfortunately, due to privacy policies, we can't share them ourselves, but if you're willing, then please do. But otherwise, I'd ask you to reach out directly to our program's email inbox if you have any other specific questions that you would like us to explore for you. So I'd like to now officially announce all of those 3 plans launched. So Finger Lime, Vanilla and Dates all officially launched. They are all available on the AgriFutures website, so please have a look. But Beck also very kindly placed them in the chat. So if you scroll up to the top of the chat today, you'll see links to those 3 plans and they all look fantastic. So just to sum out and round out today, some of the phrases that I heard today that I think really summed up, you know, the speakers and the content that we covered. Emerging industries are productive, innovative and sustainable. Well, I'll absolutely champion that one. And the stakeholders, I'll go on to say the stakeholders that we work with, you know, are the driving force, and they're absolute delight because they have that really wonderful growth founder mentality. So always exciting and very passionate to work with. Automation, critical to compete. I think that was a really another nice point that we heard. Access to capital is a challenge and we need to make the hard easier. I think that was yours, Tom. I really like that. Make the hard easier. Couldn't agree more. Everyone who knows me, I love it simple. Al will attest to that. And also being smart and savvy as an emerging industries founder. Well, I think I summed that up. I think they all are. I think, you know, these industries are emerging and they are driving forward because they are founded by these smart, savvy individuals. And just finally, you know, I think consider whether equity or debt finance is best for you. And I think we've really started that discussion here today and heard some really great pointers. I saw some people taking notes. So I'm hoping that you all found that really beneficial. But look, I'll end it there. Thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation today, and as Al said, never long enough, but I think it's a good starting point. So thank you again to everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon and evening wherever you may be, and until next time, we will have a 4th plan launch, so stay tuned. Al has agreed to stay on board next year. Thanks everyone.